Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Bonjour. Uhandet. Comment allez-vous aujourd'hui? How are you today? It is a pleasure for me to be with you today. It's a special day. For those of you who do not know me, I am Eva Arisani and I will be your host. It's been some time, I know. It's been a minute. I am so sorry, but like you, I've been very busy. But as you can see, I could not stay quiet because today is a special day, like I said. We are celebrating International Translation Day. That's correct. Whoa. And I am a translator. I love languages, and I could not just stand there and not do anything. So I thought, what can I do? And I was inspired to do a special episode with very special people. And I'm sure you will love this episode because it's going to be very interesting, especially if you want to become a translator, an interpreter, a language expert. So I welcome you to another episode of The Language Maven, brought to you by my company, Transcentral Pty Limited. And this episode is special because we are celebrating International Translation Day, which takes place every 30th day of September. And to mark the day, we are tackling the following topic. Why is translation a profession? Yes, that's a hot topic. And with me, I have two beautiful people, and I will let them introduce themselves. I have Simone. Bonjour, Simone. Welcome to the show.
Merci.
And the man of the day, Siala. Bonjour, Siala. Hello, Siala. It's time you learn French, you know. How are you, Siala?
Hi, I'm fine and how are you? I'm not sure if I'm audible.
We can hear you. Thank you. We can hear you. Okay, thank you very much. So I will let them introduce themselves because I want them to tell you, what they do and why they love their profession so much and why they are here with me. So maybe we should say ladies first, Simone.
Thank you very much, Eva. Hello, everyone. My name is Simone Barroso. I got married about 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago. And so my married name is Stain. So if you hear Simone Barroso Stain, that will be me, both surnames. Thank you very much, Eva, for letting me join you on this very special day. Happy Translation Day to everybody out there, all the translations, all of those of you with a love for language who works with it every day and who appreciate the intricacies of what translation entails. So I am a language practitioner by profession. I studied language practice in 2008. I obtained my degree in language practice in 2010, and then in 2011 I did my honors degree in language practice at the Northwest University. And I think my love for languages started with at a very young age. I grew up in a bilingual household, Afrikaans and English, and I sort of just grew up um, understanding both, speaking both, reading both, and this sort of made me think about language differently. You know, they say that bilinguals think about the world differently, and I think that is very much the case, because you start to wonder, you know, why does somebody say something this way in English and this way in Afrikaans, and you know, where did it come from? And then you go down a little rabbit hole. So I think the inquisitive nature is also what made me want to become at least somebody who works with languages. I wasn't sure what yet until much later on. And I got introduced into the world of language practice when I was in matric. So I visited the university, and I spoke to a lecturer who noticed that I had an aptitude in languages and that I had very strong grades in my languages. And she said, "Did you know that there's a whole world out there that you can use to your advantage in working with languages?" And so I pursued it. And at the end of my studies, got I got employed by the Northwest University as an educational interpreter. And from there on a daily basis, I worked in English and Afrikaans every day, and I worked with text as well. And as I grew more knowledgeable in my field and I grew more confident, I eventually opened up my own practice and started working with clients on a private basis. And yes, and I've been doing that for the last is it 11, 12 years. So yes, that is in a nutshell why I decided to do what I did and where I am at the moment. I hope
Thank
that gives
you.
you a good overview.
Thank you very much, Simone. And it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you very, very much. Now let's hear from Ciala. Ciala, please tell us more about you. Ciala? 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 Okay, I'm wondering if he's still connected. Ciala?
Mm.
Oh,
Oh
we
dear.
lost Ciala. Okay, well, I'm sure he will reconnect just now. Okay, so we will be waiting for Ciala, but maybe let me introduce myself again as well for those who don't know me. So my name is Eva Arissani. I am Gabonese, but I live and work in South Africa. I also did language studies. I studied at University of Pretoria, where I got my BA in English language, and I also got an honors degree in English language, but with a specialization in, translation, interpretation, and later on, because I was really interested, in working with languages, I developed a love for teaching French as a foreign language, and I've been doing that for many years. And then I was doing both. I was translating and I was teaching French as a foreign language for years. And believe it or not, but it's only this year that I decided to deepen my knowledge, in translation, and to start a master's degree. So I'm also doing a master's degree with Wits University, and I'm loving it. It's an eye opener. It makes me grow as a language practitioner, as a translation theorist, I would say, as a translation practitioner, and as a language lover. And I have more than 15 years of experience having had the opportunity to translate for different clients in different fields. And that's an opportunity that not so many translators have. And I think that that happens especially when you are a freelancer, because then, you don't really specialize in one field. You get to touch on, different fields. And that is a wonderful experience. It's so rich, and then it also helps you break barriers, and you end up being more confident,
Yes,
learning more, discovering different things, and it
yes,
opens up your mind, and it helps you develop different skills as a translator, because not every document is the same. Not every
mm,
field will require the same skills, the same competence, the same experience, the same knowledge. So it is important to keep on building your knowledge. And I think that really this conversation is very important, because I've seen on social media, I've heard, during conversations, people saying, but translation is not a profession. Anyone who is bilingual or who speaks many languages can be a translator or can be an interpreter. And then
yes,
I thought, hmm, you know what? I think that this is a good topic to tackle. And I'm so glad that Simon is here. And it's a pity because we lost Ciala. I don't know if he will manage to reconnect, but we will continue because we want to have that conversation. So let me bring back Simon. And okay, Simon, let me just bring you back now. There you go. Okay, let's use this one. There, that's much better. All right, Simon. So, um, like I said, I thought that it would be interesting to have the discussion. Why is translation a profession? And for those of you who are following us, for more details on this very important day, you are more than welcome to click on this link. It explains a lot of things. In the link, the United Nations explain the role of language professionals. They explain why the 30th of September. They explain multilingualism, and they explain the importance of such a day. So, Simon, why do you think that translation is a profession?
Well, Eva, I think that's a very good question to ask, because a lot of people will have misconceptions about what translation actually entails, and that if you know two languages well enough, then that immediately makes you a translator. But translation is actually a very old profession. It goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And it's only recently that it's been recognized as a formal profession. And since then, there's been amazing developments in um, awareness of translation and research on translation, and with the push towards multilingualism and the preservation of heritage, I think that is so entangled um, when it comes to language. I think their translation is starting to also play a more prominent role. And so I think the argument for translation is that there will never truly be a lingua franca that everybody will speak, and because people communicate for different purposes, and translators understand that people communicate for different purposes, and that there are areas in which it isn't just as simple as switching to one language. There will always be multilingual contexts and situations in which a person fulfilling the role of a translator will be necessary. And the more you understand about, the more knowledge you have about the two sets of cultures that you are translating between, essentially, um, the more you realize that it isn't just something that anybody can just do, and that it requires a lot of research in order to convey meaning the way.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So
And
everything is
I will stop you there because you said
about.
something very, very, very good. You mentioned the importance of research. And this is something a lot of bilingual people will not understand, probably,
Mm,
that a good translator or a good interpreter is also a good researcher, because research is at the basis of our work. We need to understand the document that we are going to translate. We need
yes.
to also, like you said, you also mentioned, a good understanding, knowledge, good skills, of the source language and the target language. So,
Mm,
as such, you need to have the skills to
yes.
really translate, taking into account those different aspects. So,
Yes.
research, the language, and being bilingual doesn't mean that you know how to use the language, as
Yes.
a linguist. Because I've heard
Mm,
bilingual people say, I'm a linguist. But no, a
no,
linguist is, like you said, you or an I who studied at university for this. and we are still learning, and we are developing our skills as language experts in
Mm.
specific language combinations. So it means that we have a very good understanding, a very good uh, mastery of those two languages, 2 or 3 languages, depending on the languages that you do. And
Yes.
please continue,
Oh,
Simone.
yes.
I will stop you from time to time just to add,
Of
and
course. No,
yeah.
that's not a problem, Ava. No, I was so yes. Basically, what a long story short, what I was basically coming at is there will never be such thing as a lingua franca where everybody will speak one language and understand each other. And so I think because there is this need in people to preserve heritage and culture, then there's so much of that caught up in language. So, and that is where people express themselves from the heart, and and there's a whole bunch of factors as to why translators are what necessary and why it should be a profession and not just anybody who does it. And I think every translator will vouch, that it comes with a huge set of challenges. As you said, you are always learning. You must always do research. You always need to understand the context in which your text is being used or communicated. And I cannot imagine. I cannot imagine that I would be able to do the translation work I have done without learning what I've previously learned. Getting a formal education on translation and looking into what it entails, translation theory, approaches to translation, um, different ways of translation, and there's technical translation, there's literary translation, there's translation for
Exactly.
different purposes. Now, with the
Mm.
emergence of large language models,
Mhm.
that are being used for chat GPT and machine learning and the likes. All of these are roping in language experts from all over the world, and that is because monolingualism is not the way, and I don't think it ever will be.
Yes, and I agree with you, and I thank you for that statement. And I'm glad that you mentioned machine translation, ChatGPT, and everything, because I know it's a hot topic. People are talking about it. I see on LinkedIn, on Facebook, a lot of translators are scared because of
Mm.
machine translation and because of the way companies are using machine translations, and they think that the profession of translator is going to disappear.
Mm.
And I personally think that it's not going to be the case because as a translator, I can see, and I've tried, and I learned also, while doing my master's. And that's also why it's important to keep on learning, to keep on growing, to understand what's happening. Whatever
Yes,
happens, you will still be the expert. You see what I mean? You will have that stickability. People will look for you. They will want to work with you because you being the expert, you will know how to navigate those, like that new era of AI and everything. So yes, there is machine translation, but machine translation alone cannot do the job. They
mm,
need human beings, they need human translators. And, it's always funny when I say human translators because it should be, that's how it should be.
yes,
But it is the way it is. The thing is, everything evolves. And our industry is evolving, and we have to be informed, to
yes,
know exactly what is happening. So I think that for a translator to still be, seen as a language expert, he or she needs to know how to use those tools. So, for
absolutely.
example, machine translation. And I think in terms of competence, so it means that the translator of tomorrow needs to be competent, but
Yes.
the level of competency will vary depending on, the time and age we are going through. And now we are in the fourth industrial revolution. We are completely in it, and it is important to be aware of the new technologies, how to use them, how to still have an impact, how to stay confident, how
Yes.
to explain, because you have to educate your clients as well,
Mm.
and for you to have all those tools, you need to be prepared accordingly. You need to go through a certain training. You need to acquire certain
Yeah.
competencies, certain skills, and being so well equipped, you will know that you will still have a job, and you will still be able to make a good living out of the profession.
Yes.
So
Yes.
what did I want to say? Please continue. I think I wanted to say something else, but I just lost the idea. Yeah.
No, I think, Ava, just to add on to what you said there, are we not now? Correct me if I'm mistaken, but that we are in actually the fifth revolution
You see,
now
so now
because of the rise of artificial
so
intelligence.
you see, I thought we were still in the fourth in the
Mm.
in
But
the industrial revolution,
I think we under
but it went
correction.
so fast. It went so ahead. We are still in the fourth industrial revolution, but now, with the way things are evolving, I believe that you might actually be right, that we could be in the fifth industrial revolution, which even, like when you say that, then
Yeah.
it even shows that it is very important. It is actually crucial for language practitioners to, if you do not know what's going on and your clients do not know what's going on, well, everyone will get lost, because
Yeah.
clients will use machine translation at their own cost, and
They
it
will.
will have terrible consequences for them, especially for technical or legal translations, or well, it depends. For very general translations, you might, get a okay translation. But
Yeah.
for more specialized one, it will be difficult, especially if you understand the different, like you explained earlier, the different types of translation. So
Yes.
please continue.
Oh no. Thank you. Yes. So I mentioned. I think there's um uh, at the Northwest University, they are at the forefront of driving, one of the drivers of multilingualism in South Africa, one of the big promoters. And if you look at the developments that there are around multilingualism, um, there is a strong move towards the preservation of heritage, like I said, that's entangled with language. And then because of because of the fact that there are so many diverse language needs, so many languages, there is always the matter of inclusion, which translation addresses most effectively. And there also, translation is a big field, and we can look into translation with the written word, but then there's also, of course, there is interpretation, which is with the
Exactly.
spoken word. And there are different
Mhm.
types of interpretation as well. You've got simultaneous interpretation
Yeah,
and consecutive.
preach. Please
Yes,
preach.
yes. And so I think there's a misconception also that when a person says they're a translator, it means that they can do absolutely everything. But there are so many niches that you can go into. And so the more you specialize, the better you become within that specific niche. And then you can diversify. So the question of what is a translator is also tricky when it comes to what translation actually entails and all of the different application it finds.
I agree with you completely, and it's very good that you mentioned the different types of interpretation, because a lot of clients do not realize that just because you hire an interpreter, it doesn't mean that that interpreter can do every types of of interpretation services. So
Yes.
you've got the consecutive one, you've got the simultaneous one, you've got
Yes.
liaison, you've got so many kinds of interpretation services, and not all interpreters are good in every types of
Yes.
interpretation services, because each one of them require certain skills. For example, if I take consecutive interpretation, you need to have a very good memory, you need to have a very good technique, and you would add to that because you are an interpreter. I am a
Yes.
translator, but because I coordinate a lot of services, interpretation
Yeah.
services, I know what I'm talking about. But you see,
Yes.
like with consecutive, you have to be excellent at note taking. You have to be to have a very good memory. You have to develop certain techniques, and the same goes with simultaneous interpretation, where you really need to be able to follow well, to
Mm.
render a good interpretation, but without doing a literal translation, you see,
Yes.
so that it has meaning, because there's a difference between literal interpretation and a good rendering, because a good rendering will mean that you follow the speaker, but you render the message in such a way
Yes.
that the target audience will follow you very well, and they will not
Mm.
struggle to understand. So it means that you need to have a very good knowledge of both
Yes.
languages, you see. And the same applies for translation. I
Mm.
want to take, for example, the case of technical translation.
Yes.
I've heard a lot of people say, for example, you've got uh, a manual. Let's say you are buying a fridge and it comes with, a user's manual, okay? And you have to translate it maybe from, let's say, from Afrikaans to English or from English to French.
Yes.
A lot of people will call it a technical translation, and they will be right. This is a technical translation. Now, let's say you have a document from a bank, and you want to translate it from English to French or from Portuguese to English, let's say. Some people will say, no, it's a technical translation. Well, I'm sorry to say that it is not a technical translation. It is a
Yeah.
different kind of translation. It is a specialized translation, but in
Yes.
the banking field. So it means that it requires you to have a certain knowledge of the banking field. And as a
Yes.
translator, not all translators are experts in certain fields. So then you
Exactly.
need to have um, a certain way, you need to have tools that will
Ye-
help you navigate, your assignment, and you will know how to tackle it. So for instance, if you've been well trained, you will know that research, like we said, is the way to go. You will also know that going maybe to talk to someone who is in the field, someone who works in the field, is also a way to go, to
Yes.
understand something that is in the source language. Because if you understand it in the source language, then you will find a way to render the message in the target language, you
Yeah.
see. And the
Yes.
same goes for literature, for example, literary translation. You need to have that creativity, that sense of, you understand the author, but you have to be careful not to become the author when you do the
Yes.
translation. You see what I mean? And
Yes.
that's a very difficult thing to do as well. So all these things show that translation, and I'm glad you emphasized on the the general aspect of translation. So we have translators who will work with the written word. You have interpreters who work with the spoken word. But they need to have a training. They need to know what they are doing. They need to have tools. They need to be equipped. They need
Yes.
to have that translation theory. And a lot of people tell me, but why do I need translation theories? I am so sorry, but translation theory give you more, because then you understand things a little bit more. For example, machine translation doesn't that didn't start today. It's something that started many years ago. We were already
Yes.
talking about machine translation in the 1960s.
Yeah.
And at that time, it was only for, like, politics and diplomacy, and and when you think about it, you're like, wow, so it's been around for some time and we didn't even realize it.
Mm.
But you see, and then you have to understand, what does it mean, for example, to work with a corpora, to work with
Yes.
all those things. And when you do
Yes.
understand it and you've got theory, you can use theory and
Yes.
practice, and then you will have a wonderful rendering. Because then,
Yes.
you will know that you've used all your tools, you've applied all your knowledge, and you will enjoy rendering the message. And also, for example, for interpreters, it is important for the client to understand that you have to put interpreters in the right conditions for them to deliver. And I think maybe you can tell us a
Mm.
little bit about that, because I'm sure that as an interpreter, you have suffered a great deal. I'm sure
Yes.
you have suffered a great deal. So
I,
please tell
I
us a
have
little bit
quite a
about
few
that.
stories. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us, give us an example of a difficult situation you will be put in that would actually make it difficult for you to render the message properly.
Okay, let me think. Okay, so my biggest this is a uniquely well, I won't say uniquely South African, but this is a very uniquely multilingual setting. What happens a lot that happens a lot in an interpretation context is you have multiple speakers of languages in a setting, and they will code switch. They will begin to code switch. So that means they will mix their language. So they will start a sentence in one language and then switch over to another, and sometimes even a third language if the speaker is multilingual. And and that makes our job very, very difficult, because you've got in situations like that, you have a panel of interpreters, and we do what you call relay interpreting. So, in other words, half of the sentence will have to come through to me as to me as the Afrikaans interpreter from, let's say, the Setswana interpreter. So the speaker will say something in Setswana, and the Setswana interpreter will have to interpret for me into English so that I can interpret that into Afrikaans. So if you've got these chunks of text that are in different, or sentences that are half in English, half in other languages, that makes our job very, very difficult. And sometimes information is lost in the process. It can be. And then another another thing that happens is when a big challenge is when the speaker speaks at a very fast pace and the
Exactly.
information is very dense. So dense information on its own and a fast speaker on its own, don't necessarily pose too much of a challenge, because if the information is very dense and the speaker speaks at a reasonable pace, then you have time to process the information. Whereas, if they are speaking very fast and the information is not dense, then it's very, you don't have to concentrate on breaking down and reconstructing a message too badly. But when it's both, it's very difficult for an interpreter to stay with the speaker. So I think the matter of educating speakers or educating people to work with language practitioners, especially interpreters, and then, to lesser people should be trained on how to work with interpreters or with translators as well. But the extent of the urgency and the immediacy is not a factor in translation as much as it is in interpreting. So that's a little bit of, a glimpse in the world of a translator versus an interpreter. But
Thank
in the
you.
end, it both requires, and that is why translation is a profession, essentially, because it's not just one thing. There's so many areas that of specialization, and that is why translation is also greatly a profession, because it's impossible to do everything. One person to do everything. So it's a very loaded question. What is a translator really when it
It
comes to?
is. It is a loaded question, right? And we won't answer the question today, but we are just, touching the surface. We're just putting it out there that we
Yes,
think that translation is a profession, and we're just giving a glimpse of why we think that it is a translation. And
absolutely.
I thank you for what you said, because it is very true. Educating people to work with translators and interpreters is, I think, of utmost importance, because it will definitely have an impact. It can be positive
Yes,
or negative. Um, if and the other thing I want to mention is the importance of preparation for interpreters. I can't stress it enough, and I'm telling my clients every time, please send us documents in advance for the interpreters to prepare, because interpreters are not experts. And imagine, and I take
yes,
this occasion to speak to all clients. They're all potential and current clients. Please bear with me. It's not every day that we celebrate Translation Day. So
yeah,
uh, understand that we need uh, documents to prepare, so that when interpreters come, they know what the meeting is about. They already did their research. They are aware of what is going to take place, and they can really easily, render the message. And everyone will be happy, especially your delegates. But when you do not send documents in advance, and you just send them maybe on the day of the meeting, then it means that they come unprepared. And even a very good interpreter can do a very bad rendering, because he or she was not given an opportunity to prepare. So by doing that, you are shooting yourself in the foot, because at the end of the day, we will still get paid, but it will have had an impact on the quality of the interpretation. So it is of utmost importance for everyone, that the
yes,
interpreters receive background documents, presentations, speeches, the detailed program days in advance, so that they can prepare. And just like you said, it is true that it is more important for clients to understand how to work with interpreters, but they also need to understand how to work with translators, because most of the time, when we receive, now you are an interpreter and a translator, I'm a translator, but I coordinate interpretation services as well. But as a translator, I don't always receive a translation brief. And I think that
yeah,
many companies don't even know what is a translation brief. They will just send you a document and say, we want it to be translated. And usually they will say for yesterday, not
yes,
understanding that translators are not robots. Okay, they need time, because the thing is, you should not start translating a document as you receive it. You need to do some research on the background to understand the
yes,
style that will be required. For example, I give you a very silly example. Let's take elections in the USA. If I receive a document in English and I have to translate it into French, but I need to understand what's going on in the USA, like I need to do some research on each contestant,
yes,
so that at least when I start translating, I translate with knowledge of what is happening. And then I will also do research in French to know
yes,
how is it described in the French media, for example. You see, so it's not something you do without preparation. So a
yes,
client needs to understand how to, and I thank you for that. Clients need to understand how to work with language practitioners. And there is a difference between a translator and an editor, for example, or a proofreader,
yes,
because not every translators are proofreaders. You translate, but
mm,
then you need a proofreader as well. And when you charge for translation separately and then from editing separately, some clients don't understand, or they think in terms of budget. But the thing is, if you
yes,
want a very good job, it is important to understand how it works. And that's why I thought it is important to have this conversation today, just to raise awareness on the beauty, the intricacies, the you know the all those different areas of
Yes.
specializations, translation is a beautiful profession. It is very global. It has so many fields. It requires so many skills. It's not just about being bilingual or speaking two or three or four languages. It's so I I just want today anyone watching to understand that please, please understand that translation is a profession. Not, you can't just wake up one morning and decide that I am a translator. It is not fair to those who are studying for it, to those who are applying practical knowledge, to those who are applying theories, to those who are really doing their job, using everything they've learned to make it, you know, uh, a wonderful job, you see.
Mm.
And the other
Yes.
thing is, then those who have not studied translation studies, or those who are who became translators because they are bilinguals, will not necessarily charge the same way a professional translator would charge, or a professional interpreter would charge, because for them, they will see that it is a very good way of earning money. So it doesn't really matter how much I'm paid for it. But for us, it does. Because,
Mm.
like 300 words can take an hour or a day, depending on the type of document that you translate. So imagine
Absolutely.
if you pay me 300 rand for something that will take my whole day, it's not really
Yes.
worth it, you see. Or if you take an interpreter for a day and you pay him like maybe 2,000, it's not fair, because that's not how the interpreter is supposed to be paid. It is a very difficult profession, and it
Yes.
requires very specialized skills and competencies. And so it must be charged accordingly. I will take the example of a doctor, of a lawyer, of an engineer. When they quote, everyone will say,
Yes.
okay, even if it's 10,000 per hour, because the assumption is it's very specialized and it has to be, more expensive.
And this
But
person has been
then,
trained.
exactly. But it's the same for us. We've been trained, we keep on learning because we are aware of the needs, of the profession, and we follow certain practices, we follow certain standards. We really want the clients to have the best work
Yes.
possible. And then it means that we also need to be paid accordingly.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you think about that, because you are an interpreter, and I'm sure you've had also your fair amount of difficulties in terms of payment and explaining why
Yes.
you should be paid such an amount.
Yes. Yes. I must say, when it comes to charging for your service, there will always be people who sort of are unhappy about it. Why is it so expensive? Like you said. Um, so, and I've had that experience. Or also, sort of, we're normally the last person that is thought of. You know, and so the whole event is everything has been budgeted for, everything everything is planned for, but oh my goodness, we don't have this translated. There's going to be these delegates who don't speak English. We better have it translated. So all of these misconceptions sort of pile up, and they sometimes make our lives a little more challenging than they need to be. But you're obviously aware that we now have the Language Practitioners Council, and the Language Practitioners Act, which really says a lot about how far we've come with translation as a profession. In South Africa, they are obviously elsewhere in the world. It is more established, I think. So um, translation is at different levels depending on what country you're in. but I think that especially multilingual countries, um, this is something that they are focusing on, and I'm glad South Africa is now a country where you can actually promote and protect the interests of language practitioners. In other words, those who are qualified, those who want to make translation and other areas of language practice their profession. Um, so yeah, that's I agree with your thoughts on this, and like you said, training people or informing people about what it is that we really do. How to work with us, what we need. The fact that we need a translation brief, like you said.
Yeah.
But
No,
we always
definitely.
ask for emails. Well, we always ask in emails. What
Mm.
is it about?
Yeah.
Who's the intended reader? So I think we can do a lot to inform the public about translators and the actual profession.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I hope that everyone is listening to us, the government, private sector,
Yes,
because I think it is important to understand how to work with language practitioners. It will make your life much better, and everyone will be happy. And on that note, we've come to the end of this beautiful episode. It's such a pity because I know we can dig further. I know
absolutely.
we
There's a
can
lot to talk
really,
about.
yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to talk about, but unfortunately, we can't do more than what we've done now. But I think that we gave people a lot to think about, right?
Yes.
I and that was the point of this episode, to really be an eye opener, and for also, I hope that whoever is watching this episode will have a new way of looking at language practitioners, especially translators and interpreters, and a new respect for what we do, because it's a profession that has so much potential. It's a profession that touches so many fields. We are interlinked. We are like, between different fields. We are, that middleman, that middle person that makes a huge difference between
Yes.
signing up a deal and not getting the deal, and
Yes.
between being understood or not being understood. And it is important to understand that translation is a profession. On that
And it's
note,
important.
exactly. So maybe one last word, Simone.
um, I think, well, I would just like to thank you, Eva, that I could be a part of this conversation. It's it was really an honor, and I enjoy working with you. And it was really an honor to give the public a little bit of a glimpse of what our profession entails. I hope that what I said was meaningful, and I apologize if I rambled a little bit.
No, don't worry. I also apologize if I rambled a little bit. People, just just so that we improvised this episode. And as I'm talking to you, I don't have Wi-Fi because Wi-Fi is not working. It stopped working 30 minutes before the show. So I had to make a plan because I was so determined to have this episode, and to record it. So don't worry, I was also all over the place, but our heart is at the right place, and I hope that you really got the message, and that you enjoyed watching us, listening to us. Please share your comments, share this if you think that it can really make a difference, and I hope it makes a big difference. Reach out, and thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much, Simon, for joining me. Thank you for, I appreciate our collaboration. We've worked together for years now.
Likewise.
And
Yes.
you are a wonderful person. You are a very professional language practitioner. And it's also an honor for me to work with you. And
Thank you so much,
for
Eva.
everyone watching us, thank you once again for tuning in. And Simon and I wish you and all our colleagues all over the world, to all the language practitioners, translators, interpreters, irrespective of your language combination, happy, blessed International Translation Day.
Happy Translation Day.
Happy Translation Day. Thank you so much for tuning in, and
Bye.
please share it and keep well, everyone. Thank you very much, Simon. Bye
Thank
bye.
you. Bye.